Today's musings will really center on measures or metrics. So let's see what might be some interesting thoughts on measures or metrics. Now, as engineers, as developers, as managers, as business people, we do obviously measure quite a bit of things. So some of these simple questions to start off this musing is, are we measuring or are we counting? We track a lot of numbers. It could be technical pieces about the product, about people, effort, progress. We track a lot of numbers in a variety of different ways. Some are automated tracking, some are tracking not, which is not automated. Question is, do they really mean something? And that I am quite sure the answer is, yeah, they do. And we're not saying that they don't. All I'm trying to say, look, we do collect a lot of numbers. Do all of them mean, because there is an effort in collection and there's an effort in analysis, and there's a significant effort in interpretation and making some use out of it. Measures seem to certainly give us a certain illusion of control. And I'm using the word illusion simply because to highlight, are we always in control? The intention is very noble. We do measure, we do collect various metrics, with certainly one of the bigger, focus of being in control. And that's just, I'm just posing a question. Are we? Could we do any better? That's all. Sometimes, I'm sure all of us have experienced that sometimes we get very enamored with some numbers, and numbers itself becomes the goal, that we need to collect this every day, every week, every release, which initially probably had certain value, but then it becomes a ritual. And then the question that needs to be asked is, what happens when numbers become the goal rather than the guide? Are they valuable? So this is just to kind of set the tone of the conversation in terms of saying, I hope we are really measuring to accomplish something. Most of us would be doing it, but sometimes it just becomes count. And larger the organization gets, it just becomes a ritual. And that's something that we have to constantly adjust as we go forward. That's the whole idea of this musings. So before I go across, since we talked about a smart QA musings, I want to connect the notion of smartness to the topic of discussion today, which is about metrics, and ask, what does smart mean in this context? Where does it connect? Why are we talking about it? I guess when we say we are doing something smart, it probably implies, yeah, we are smart because we think better. We think differently. We are more logical, we are more creative, and so on and so forth. So it's more from a mindset and a thinking perspective. One of those aspects seems to be, hey, that's an act of smartness. The second implication of being smart is about doing well. So I have, my mindset is different. I'm thinking better, and it's not just about me thinking. I'm able to perform. I'm able to do. I'm able to act, and therefore that's about doing well. Okay, which I think we all understand. So there is a notion of thinking and doing. Now, is that all? And the third, really, which connects to the discussion of today, is assess and steer. Because when we do something, it's not always we are going in the right direction. We meander a bit. Sometimes we go on the wrong path. And that is where, I guess, we are constantly course correcting. We are assessing something. The rate at which we are doing, going or moving. We are looking at the quality of certain outputs. Maybe we are looking at the effort expended. So many different parameters we assess, and we're constantly adjusting. And that is really where measures come into picture, which I'm sure we appreciate. So I'm just trying to put the context in terms of when we say smart. Smart is about saying, hey, this guy is very sharp and sensitive. He or she is able to assess stuff that makes sense. And he or she is able to steer, and maybe we need some kind of an objective way of doing this. Now, is it objective only? We'll talk about it as we close down. But certainly we need some kind of measures. Not all of them would be probably clear, structured, numerical, and so on. Some could be unstructured, it could be subjective, and so on and so forth. We'll dwell upon that as we go more towards the end of this discussion. So given the context that AK, smartness is about assessment and steering, so there are many measures. We can put them into measures related to product, measure related to the practice, measure related to how to manage, measures related to business, capacity, activities, outcomes. So here's a bit of a cloud word art. To illustrate, we can categorize or we can put together in many, many ways. And this is just an indicator. I'm sure you can add to this list of stuff, which is, measures can be indicators. It may not be exact numbers. Some measures can be customer oriented. Some measures can be used by engineering and so on and so forth. Just trying to put the lay of the land, so to speak. And these measures can be written as measures of, measures for, measures by, and so on. Right? So let's see if we can arrange these and look at some of these and what they mean, and then related to where we started off. Are we measuring? Are we just counting? How does it add value? That's really the context. So here is a simple mind map. This is, as I always mention, this is not necessarily meant to be fully comprehensive because this is not pure pedagogy, but I think we appreciate that measures on what? Measures on practice, measures on organization process, measures on the product could be one. I'm just trying to now take that cloud art picture, give it a little more detail, and then we'll kind of walk through a bit in terms of what are some of the things that we can think of when we arrange, right? And when you look at this, what we're really saying is, look, maybe we have certain measures that relate to the capability of a process, which kind of tells you, is the process consistent? Is it producing reasonably good results? Is it consistent in terms of the activities? Does it have less variation irrespective of who does it? Is it clear in terms of what we do? Is it efficient in terms of how it is structured? Is it producing outcomes that is meaningful? All of them to a larger degree related by the notion of process capability, which fundamentally means that it is capable of producing a meaningful output consistently every time with least of variation, which is normally denoted by a process capability, which once upon a time was the basis for CMM models. CMM model, and we talked about level 5 to 1. We used to talk about level 1 to 5, and they were basically related to. And if you kind of look at it even from the Six Sigma model, it's also built on the notion of process capability. So we collect some measures and then correlate, we analyze, and then say, this gives us an indication of the process capability. Now, when we ultimately produce a product, it's a combination of an organizational process, which hopefully is highly capable, along with the individual effectiveness of each of the people who play a role in building the product. So that's why the bit of a plus sign up here, which says process plus practice helps us produce great products, right? And practice, what we're really where we're really focused on from a measures perspective, what are measures that could give us a good indication of the effectiveness of the process, of the practice, So which means if you give me something to test in the context of QA or review, a non-code artifact, and I apply some techniques, I use my experience, I use my heuristics, all of which comes under the bucket of practice. And what we are trying to say is, are you effective? Are you hopefully catching issues? Are you able to put out a good approach and a strategy? Are you able to convert that into beautiful scripts which are efficient? All that relate to the notion of process effectiveness. So you may have measures related to issues, number of issues, amount of activity, kind of techniques used, and so on and so forth. So there are measures related to practice, measures related to process, and ultimately we are trying to measure the outcome in terms of a product. So we might end up having quality measures, which in a very simplistic manner, we look at it as defects, right? But you can also look at it from various other aspects like escapes. Or there are other aspects like levels and so on and so forth, categories of defects and so on and so forth. So this is one way of kind of looking at measures and say, hey, maybe this is one way of classifying. I have process capability measures, practice effectiveness measures, I've got product quality measures. What else? Well, we can look at another view. We can look at it from the view of measures related to activities and measures related to outcomes, which I'm sure you appreciate. Why do we do it? Because we want to manage, we want to control. So we are measuring activities, how much of effort we spend, how much of time we planned, what is the actual time we took, what is the size of code originally estimated, what is it now, and so on and so forth. So there could be a variety of things that we are doing, and they're all do-related measures. And therefore, there is some outcomes, right? And the outcome-related activities, how many issues you found, how many escapes how many issues you missed, how many test cases yielded issues, and so on and so forth. So that could be split across the entire continuum of the life cycle. Now, when we measure activities, we normally get very happy with generating, a lot of measures or coming up with measures and metrics to measure activities. Activities tell you where you are in some sense, and also trying to tell you how fast you're going, are you going in the right direction, and so on. So they are obviously useful for control. And all of us like to stay in control and manage that. But what really matters is outcomes, right? Are we efficient? Are we consistent? Are we, super effective? And stuff like those, right? And that is where I think the notion of measuring with intent, of kind of setting out outcomes as to what we want with respect to the product, with respect to the practice, with respect to the process, and then kind of figuring out what could be suitable activity-related metrics would probably help, rather than totally being, let's figure out the activities and then somehow connect to outcomes. So just keep that in mind, that measuring with intent helps us to not just be a bean counter, right? So if you progress on and look at measures, then you can say, okay, from whose point of view, measures for whom? And measures could be for the management, for the engineering folks, for the business guys, for the end customers, right? And that's what it is. So as an engineering person, as a set of people who are busy building something, I think we're all focused to a large degree on the doing part. How are you doing? Are you doing well? What kind of activities are you doing? Are you within the limits of time, cost? Are you meeting the quality deadlines? Are you meeting certain gate criteria? So to a large degree, we are focused on movement, doing, as an engineer, right? And that's the who, and that's the intent, therefore. Whereas if I'm a manager who is managing the project, managing the team, managing the program, and then my focus is on control to a large degree. I want to know, I have been given a set of resources in terms of time, cost, people, money, budget, and I would love to know, where am I? Am I over any of those, right? And of course, because my focus is on, in some sense, managing the budgets, managing the resources. If I go further up outside and look at it from a business to the company that we work with, for example, it could be outcomes. And they are interested in saying, okay, we are doing this wonderful release, we're building this new product. What does it mean? Does it help us to enhance the revenue? Does it help us, to get more profits? Does it, is it reducing? Are we doing something better to reduce costs? Are we improving our market share? How is it attached to the context of the business? And that's where the measures would naturally come. And finally, of course, the external and outward piece is about customer. And there the focus is really about results. So maybe you bought a product, maybe you built a product and that I bought, or maybe you did a bespoke product that I'm consuming. What's the result? How does it improve my business? How does it help me in getting better results in my work, right? So, I'm not anymore looking at it as a software or a system. I'm looking at it as an integral piece which drives my business. And that's where I guess sometimes in a very simplistic fashion, we use the idea of CSATs or customer sats as one simple way to kind of say, will you buy from me again? Are you happy with what we have, etc. But what it really means is, after having deployed my system, did it help you to scale better? Does it help you to reduce your cost of a business operation? And therefore, does it help you to enhance reach, and so on and so forth. And that's really the results. Now, we don't have to be myopic in terms of looking at measures only from this direction, right? As just from the internal notion of engineering and management. The higher notion of value comes in from the outcomes of business and the results that we deliver to the customers, right? And that's interesting to keep in mind. And not all the measures in each of these, as we go from inwards to outwards, as the circle expands, you may not be able to collect some of those very frequently. Maybe customer-related measures, you might do it once you only release, or once in a quarter, or maybe once in a year, or whatever periodicity. Whereas, as you see, the most inward-centered stuff, which is engineering, you might be collecting certain measures fairly frequently, right? Could be maybe every day, every week, and so on and so forth, or every build, and so on and so forth. So having talked about the measures on practice, process, product, of activities and outcomes for different roles with different intents, now we touched upon this in terms of to do what, and that is to transform. What? We'll talk about it. To control and manage, which I think we understand. And of course, the third and the most important thing is the fact that we are looking at measures to improve what we do. So these are three things that we possibly we were talking about. So what do you transform? You're looking at transformation of the individual practices. So we are measuring something to say, how am I constantly and continually be evolving and maybe doing a more meaningful transformation as an individual, and therefore getting better in what I do, faster in what I do, right? Solve problems quickly and faster and be able to adjust. So all we're constantly looking for is personal transformation. And then you're looking at the organizational transformation, which is more often done by a process, right? So the practice part we talked about is more of a personal transformation. The organization part of transformation is more often driven by process. And both of them can be enabled with whatever suitable technologies and tools to do this job. So constantly we are trying to become a better butterfly, or that's what the picture is kind of saying. Second kind of stuff that we want to think of measures for, to be able to control, to be able to manage, which I think we appreciate quite a bit, because we are very focused on the act of delivery, because the act of delivery is non-negotiable most of the time. We need to meet the deadline. We have a certain budget in terms of money and people and so on, and that's it. And we are trying to constantly see, are we meandering away? And therefore they are more often measures which are related to the act of doing and steering, as we talked about earlier. The last one is in terms of improvement. So when you say transformation improvement, here I'm obviously also talking about process and practice, but I think the more important focus that I want to put is improve the context of the product. So we are having a more product-centric approach and looking at it from process and practice. But whereas when you say transform, it is also including certain subtle notions of mindsets and culture and the way we do things, and better team bonding, a lot of other things that come along from a non-product perspective, but which have a significant value to the outcome of building great products, right? So that's what we kind of dwell upon in terms of measures to accomplish what. Now, when we go and ask yourself, transform, again, I'm probably going to belabor the point of saying, transform individuals versus the collective, which we briefly saw in the prior one, and that's what it is. Personal transformation and a collective transformation. More often, we are fairly focused on the collective. And that's why I think there is sometimes a fair amount of emphasis, probably sometimes too much, on the notion of a process. And to enable a process, technology and tools can be very much used. So when you say I've got a management tool, I've got analysis tool, I've got dashboards, I've got collaboration tools, all of them probably are all in various ways, I would say imposition, but enabling a process to be in a way pushed down and enabled to do it more easily and faster and so on. But what is also to be equally important and understood, this is in the context of individual transformation, because individual transformation is more personal and enables the individual to get more deeper, more broader over time. So as early initial young engineers, I think what we want is enormous amount of depth so that they can, or he or she can, solve better problems, be able to think better, as we talked about. And that's where certain mindset pieces come into picture, right? And as we go further up, then we start working with teams and start managing parts of teams. I think we look at softer aspects that come into picture. communication, working with some problem solving. All those are also transformations. Not necessarily all of them are related to the product per se, as we all understand. So this is to give that flavor in terms of highlight measures to transform an individual from a personal side and a collective as a team and organization. And both of them have tools and technology have a certain meaningful role. And finally, why do we do that? We solve business problems, right? We're not measuring just to steer, to control, to produce reports, to transform, control. But what we're really doing is, like to say, look, we are running a business. All of us are part of a business. Each of us have a different role. Ultimately, what we have as an organization, we have a certain capacity. We have a certain team size. We have certain budgets. We have certain infrastructure in terms of hardware, software, space, whatever, right? But as an organization, one of the challenges that all of us have is, I have only a certain capacity, but I need to hopefully meet the goals of a growing organization to do more work. And that's a bigger challenge that we're constantly solving. So we are looking at it from a business challenge and saying, look, what are we measuring and how are we taking care of the fact that we are able to get smarter to be able to do more work with either the same or lesser capacity, right? And of course, I'm sure you're following some of those interesting things that happen in the largest democracy of the second largest democracy maybe now, because it's it's in the US. And then you're seeing about the new quote unquote the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOJ, which Elon Musk is apparently heading as an advisor. And you're probably seeing how he's trying to cut off a lot of stuff, because he's saying, look, there's only so much capacity that we have. And he's talking it from a money perspective. And he's trying to accomplish more. It's a different question of whether the means and methods that are being adopted. We're not getting into the politics of that. But the whole idea here is to say, look, sometimes we have bloated capacities we reduce. Sometimes you have same capacity and you want to get more. You decide how you want to do it. And then when we talk about capacity, we're also talking about personal effectiveness. So the kind of things, the kind of practice, the kind of stuff that is there decides how much we are able to produce, how good we are able to produce. And that's where the personal notion of practice comes. Second kind of business challenge that we are constantly confronted is speed, right? We want to do faster. We want to reduce the cycle of releases. We want to be able to do stuff which are better. I guess there is a bit of a background noise. Our work is happening. So we'll see if we can manage it. Okay. Now, the third and the final step of challenges is about economics of business. Because at the end of the day, business economics matter. And that's really about cost, revenue, profit. And all we're asking is, okay, we are doing something, we are in business. So how is it helping us grow in terms of revenue? How are we managing costs better such that we can improve profits? And that's the final notion of measures which are really related to the business in the context of economics. And remember, these are some of the challenges that probably most of us face as seasoned professionals running either engineering teams or businesses and so on and so forth. So we can't just look at it from a technical measure and be satisfied with it, right? And therefore, when you look at measures, we are looking at measures related to the product and the business internal view. And we are also looking at measures could be from the external view, as in terms of customers and users, right? So when we look at a product view, I think we are looking at it from delivery, quality. When you're looking at business view, we're looking at it from revenue and profit. And I put the left one to say me, my team, and my company. Whereas when we're talking about it from the customer and user, we're really talking about the external view of people who are consuming the product, and therefore we're really asking, how are we assisting the end users to do their jobs better? How are we enabling the business, which is made up of different users, to enhance their business and enhance their reach? And that's really the landscape, if you will, of measures. This is one set of views. I'm sure there is probably more detail. There are other ways to also, there are other dimensions that we can add along too, and maybe there are other measures. So before we close down, I wanted to give you a picture of saying, sometimes the measures are very specific and clear. So we have numbers, we measure, some are qualitative, we convert the qualitative into a quantitative number. And then, or sometimes we, represent it as colors, red, green, blue, for example. It's not a pure number, but they're very specific. They're very clear. So we can collect them, we can analyze them. But sometimes measures are also there in a lot of unstructured stuff. So maybe I've got data which is available in a document, which is probably not in a spreadsheet. Maybe it's just loose document. So maybe I have a spec. Maybe it's a collection of various user stories, or maybe it's a collection of test cases in not necessarily written in a structured form. There are metrics in that. Yes, you can extract. I've been doing some experiments using my methodology, using a custom GPT that I built. And therefore, I found that, interestingly, GenAI can help. So I edit certain documents and then say, look, help me understand if the quality of the content is good. Is it missing something? Tell me measures of goodness of that particular content or document. So it's important to kind of understand the fact that we can use unstructured sources, and we can extract today data which could be indicative of measures and metrics. And GenAI can certainly help, provided there is a meaningful methodology which allows us to get. Otherwise, it will not be very useful. And that's what I was trying to allude to. And maybe at a later point in time, I'll probably muse about it when I conduct the full experiment and I finished with it totally. So I just wanted to leave you with the final stuff saying, hey, every measure need not be specific and clear, be it quantitative or qualitative, but it can also be, it's very hidden. So you can just look at unstructured piece of information and also extract. And that's, provided there is a well-formed model and methodology that drives to analyze the unstructured data/information. Final parting words is metrics are lovely. Metrics give us a sense of control. We want to collect a lot of it. We want to do something with it, but be careful about being seduced by metrics. Right? Numbers can mislead. We might be taking a lot of comfort in tracking activities, measures related to activities vis-a-vis outcomes. We would be maybe very interested in looking at number of test cases executed, number of defects found, maybe put them in various charts in terms of rates and densities and so on. Some of them can indicate, what we've done in terms of activities. But the real question is it good, bad, ugly in terms of final quality? And that's an outcome. So outcomes are probably more meaningful and valuable than just activity. So just don't be seduced, right? Just from activity measures. For example, don't seek comfort in just tracking. And just because we've got 30 different measures doesn't make us mature. It doesn't always mean better, right? More tests, more automation, more dashboards. More doesn't always indicate notion of better. In fact, the opposite is what is better. And when we talk about smart QA, we kind of use the word do less, accomplish more. So the idea here is to simplify and see if we can do as less as possible, but hopefully get better results, accomplish better. And therefore, the closing remark where we started, are we counting, are we measuring, is about saying, look, we're not chasing, we should not just be chasing numbers and losing purpose. So just be sensitive. So I just wanted to, we started off about the entire musings in terms of, are we just counting? And we're kind of trying to close it in between. We try to look at, in a way, the landscape of various measures, what they mean, and try to put the spotlight in some of those and so on and so on. Right? To wrap up, no great advice here. I'm not trying to be pedagogic and advisory here, but just certain interesting stuff. I guess we all appreciate that the measurement should be a tool, not be trapped. So we shouldn't get trapped with our own measures and then say, oh my gosh, I have to do this, right? Because that's the ritual. Sometimes just measuring and using only measurement as feedbacks and improvement may not be. It may not be because it just isn't sometimes a number. It may be talking to somebody. Maybe it's having measurement shaping, having certain intentions, and the approaches are indicators of what we do and how we do. They're not exactly metrics. So keep in mind, sometimes it's just not a number because it may be certain intentions that we have. And finally, do appreciate the fact, which I'm sure all of us do, measures ultimately shape the direction and the progress. So if what we measure, and therefore in whatever form, whether numerical, non-numerical, qualitative, subjective, of activities, outcomes, process, product, for engineering, etc., if they don't help us, steering the direction so that we can meander less, cut the variation, and go to some higher level in whatever it could be better quality, lower cost, better efficiency, solve some challenges, then it is probably not, to rethink. And that's just to give you in terms of 3 parting points, if you will, as we muse and close down these musings. So thank you so much